Hey Sardis, and good morning to you on this Transfiguration Sunday. I'm coming to you from the Stillerman kitchen in our little spot of gratitude. We dedicate this space to our kids' artwork, but we also try to carve out a space to be intentionally thankful for what's happening in the seasons of our lives. This past fall, we used the bottom half of this wall to do a thankful turkey. Each night we added a feather to the turkey, and on the feather was something that we were thankful for. During this season of Valentine's, we have begun each meal by sharing something that we love about each member of our family and then writing it on the hearts on the wall. So I thought this a fitting space to express my gratitude for each of you, most especially for the way that you demonstrate tangible love in our world. Thank you for your corporate acts of worship. Yes, formally and virtually as we come together this morning, but also scattered and informally in the way you relate to one another, in the way you love neighbor, in the way you seek out life-giving and affirming and enthusiastic relationships with one another, in the way you seek to be an extension and an embodiment of God's love and God's presence in the world. So thank you to each one of you for the many gifts you bring to this place and for the way that you are a corporate expression of Sardis Baptist Church. Our lesson this morning comes from Mark's Gospel, chapter 9, verses 2 through 9. Hear now these good words. Verse 9:2 begins, 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John and led them up a high mountain apart by themselves. And Jesus was transfigured before them, and his clothes became dazzling white, such as no one on earth could bleach them. And there appeared to them Elijah with Moses, who were talking with Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He did not know what to say, for they were terrified. Then a cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud there came a voice, "This is my Son, the beloved. Listen to him." Suddenly, when they looked around, they saw no one with them anymore, but only Jesus. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus ordered them to tell no one about what they had seen until after the Son of Man had risen from the dead. Friends, this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. This morning, the word that our lection brings to mind for me is filter. Filter. We live in a world of filters. We want to see and be seen in a flattering light. Social Pilot, which is a social media blog, reports that choosing the right filter for the images you use in your Instagram feed can improve the chances of someone viewing your post by more than 20%. And if you use a filter, it can improve the chances of someone engaging or commenting on your post by more than 45%. Now let me stop there. Some of you in this audience may not use Instagram or other social media outlets. So a filter in this instance is an enhancement to your image, a change in tone or contrast or color that helps your image to be more captivating. And it works. Why does this bowl of ramen noodles that you nuked in the microwave and paid less than 50 cents for look like you just ate dinner at a fancy noodle house? How is it that the realtor can take a picture of your house at sunset or use a wide-angle lens of your dining room and people on Zillow no longer notice the chipped paint on your front door or the scuff marks on your floors and walls from children and pets? Of course, it's not just social media that incorporates filters. I've seen enough gas station churros, hot dogs, and burritos underneath a heat lamp in my time to feed an army. And yet I've never, not once, been tempted to indulge in a single one of them. But this past weekend, as I pumped my gas at the QT, the signage at the pump and the video that entertained me both made really convincing arguments, so much so that I seriously considered spending $2 on a breakfast burrito and off-brand energy drink. Almost. I couldn't quite pull the trigger. I'll also admit to you this morning that both Jacqueline and I binged and delighted in the new Netflix series Bridgerton. The bright, pastel-inspired filter in the show's intro song helped to solidify our fandom. And right this very moment, as I'm talking to you, I am using the blemish removing feature on Zoom and a web camera with a fancy ring light to help me appear warmer. Check this out. So filters are alternative presentations of light. They help us to both recognize and consider people and objects in new ways. Filters captivate and engage disinterested audiences. I tell you all of this today because I think when you hear today's story, one reaction may be to simply dismiss this story as an outlandish fairy tale. And another reaction, given our reliance on social media and filtering, might be to characterize the Transfiguration story as a glorified Instagram post. I want to encourage you to resist both of these options. Instead, I want to invite you to consider how you might recount to others the glory and majesty of God. Something none of us can fully articulate with our limited vocabulary. And, oh, by the way, can you make God's glory, can you make God's majesty something that is memorable and authentic and theologically sound and have it all be tucked neatly into a larger narrative? That's a tall order. It's the one that Mark is assigned, and I think it's one that Mark's author performs in an admirable way. Mark's gospel tells the story of disciples, some named, some unnamed, some not yet even born, all of whom are seeking to understand who and what they are in the presence of. Jesus, I think, was beginning to understand his calling, and his learning curve for articulating and revealing that calling to the disciples steepens throughout his journey. While the professional ministry of Jesus surely had high drama, like in today's story, this 3-year journey wasn't all climax. Remember, one moment Jesus is doing the most basic of human things, walking or talking, sharing meals, being in community with friends. And in other moments, Jesus is healing folks or being filled with the Spirit to reframe ancient texts or finding courage to challenge powerful authorities or demonstrating a sense of empathy that is rarely seen. The disciples, at this point in Mark's story, are only beginning to learn how God is empowering this ordinary friend of theirs to do extraordinary things. and the disciples are just beginning to conceive that God might empower them in similar ways too. So, yes, yes, yes. Climbing a mountain and seeing your best friend turn tide white, all while engaging Moses and Elijah, is about as strange and incomprehensible a story as one can conjure. But whether historical or metaphorical or somewhere in between, there are some really profound details to be had in this story. The mention of Elijah and Moses is pivotal. Jesus is not only on equal footing, but his prominence and purpose exceeds that of the two most impactful figures in Israel's story. The one who introduced the law, and the one imagined to be present at the end of times. The presence of Elijah and Moses signals to Peter and to James and to John that Jesus will be central to bringing about God's purpose for the world. These men won't yet be able to articulate the significance of what they've seen, but they will know that the life of Jesus is significant beyond their expression. This morning's text also tells us that Jesus turns bright white, tide white, whiter and purer than any human has ever been able to bleach a garment. I think that's a fancy but more accessible way to describe a light or a sense that none of us has words to truly express. Peter doesn't have a smartphone handy, but his first instinct is to document this event with the construction of 3 dwellings. But before Peter can even act on his thought, the moment passes like a cloud or a vapor. Jesus' coloring is more subdued, and he tells his friends, "Shh, let's not share this on social media just yet." I think it's very telling of who Jesus is, and indeed of the nature and character of the God Mark's gospel presents to us, that Jesus does not want to capture or document this moment. This event, this awakening, is a foretaste of what's to come, but it's only a preview, only a short glimpse. God is revealed in the brief moments of life, and it's that small revelation that will bring the disciples energy and hope and renewal in the journey to the cross and beyond. I think at this point in the story, Jesus is comfortable for his friends to see and know what's next for him, in order that they too can begin to process what his life means for them. But I also think Jesus wanted the disciples to know him, to remember him, and to engage with him in the ordinariness of life. I think Jesus wanted them to come down the mountain, because it's at the bottom of the mountain, in the world, in the ordinary, in the work of those toiling to live in God's law, that God is revealed. Now, I know that social media followers didn't exist in those days, but Rome's leaders weren't lacking for illustrations to embellish and enhance the public's perception of their power. In this story, Jesus is illustrated with a bright, beaming light. That seems a whole lot less ostentatious to me than Herod sitting on a gigantic throne in the hall of a great marble palace, or Caesar draped in purple riding a war horse in a sea of bronze helmets. And Jesus, this simple, powerful, authentic figure, declines the publicity. Can you imagine Caesar or Herod or even the political leaders of today discouraging such publicity? In a world consumed with filters and consumed with demonstrating power, Mark's gospel introduces us to a humble leader called to do transformative things with a desire to share that transformation in the most human experiences. God's most poignant plans for the world will not be revealed in showy, glitzy kings. They will be revealed in quiet, gentle, thoughtful people like Jesus. So, yes, this may be a fantastic, terrific, miraculous story. And yet, somehow, some way, the story of the Transfiguration illumines the humanity and the decency and the friendship of Jesus. And Jesus to me is even more powerful when he's unfiltered. Let me close with one last thought. I think our world is in an awful rush to document and proclaim our worth through filtered lenses. Don't get me wrong, I really do want to see your prized red-orange tomato. I really do want to see your glamorous family photo and your super cute children. And yes, I agree, it is more pleasant to watch the baseball game in July on a field that's painted green. But please don't let the filter be the only part of the story, nor the only thing that gives its subject value. Give thanks in these days ahead for the miracle of the seed, for the miracle of the sweat of the gardener and the cool dirt on her hands, and for all the time and thought that went into growing that tomato. Celebrate the accomplishment of herding the kids together for the family photo, and let that photo remind you of their wonderful humanity, including especially the parts that get messy and silly too. And yes, let a green manicured field also illumine the people who labored to make it just right, and the pleasure that spectators and support staff and ball player each exude in the playing of a game. And yes, friends, be captivated by a transfiguration. It helps us to frame the significance of Jesus. But friends, it's not the filter that makes Jesus special. Here is a person who's not afraid to get his robe dirty. Here is a person that doesn't want to monetize your likes. Here is a person whose most human elements, love and vulnerability and empathy, whose most human elements reveal God's most endearing qualities. And here, friends, is a person whose very humanity allows us to love and embrace our own humanity and that of our neighbors as well. Friends, in this filtered world, may we strive to see the value and beauty of an unfiltered people, made holy and wonderfully in God's image. And may we work for the unfiltered creation Christ calls us to bid near. Friends, may it be so, and may it be soon. Amen.